Due to the absence of self-propelled guns in the U.S. Army, a recommendation was made in October 1941 to develop a 105mm Howitzer motor carriage based on the M3 medium tank chassis. This led to the creation of a prototype which underwent extensive testing and several modifications to resolve performance issues. By March 1942, it was approved for service as 105mm Howitzer Motor Carriage M7, leading to full-scale production. Better known as the Priest, a nickname inspired by the pulpit-like machine gun ring on its turret, the M7 saw widespread service throughout World War II. It first entered combat in North Africa and was later deployed in multiple campaigns across Europe, Italy, and the Pacific. Despite its World War II origins, the M7 remained in service well into the 1950s and was adopted by numerous countries worldwide, extending its operational legacy far beyond the war. Hello dear viewers, Tank Encyclopedia is currently closing in on 100,000 subscribers. With this important milestone in sight, we'd like to remind you to subscribe if you enjoy our content and want to see more. Now, back to the video. In 1940, the United States launched a rapid rearmament and modernization program in preparation for the escalating global conflict. That same year saw the establishment of the U.S. Armored Force, which revived interest in self-propelled field artillery. According to the 1940 Table of Organization and Equipment, each armored division was to include an armored field artillery regiment. However, a major problem soon became evident. No suitable self-propelled vehicles were available, and there was also a shortage of towed 105mm howitzers to equip them. As a stopgap, units were issued the M1897 75mm gun towed by the M2 half-track. A breakthrough came in October 1941 when Major General Jacob L. Devers recommended the construction of two prototype 105mm howitzer motor carriages based on the M3 medium tank chassis. By November, approval was granted to equip these pilots with the 105mm howitzer M2A1 and its associated components. Baldwin Locomotive Works was tasked with producing both vehicles as quickly as possible for testing at Aberdeen and by the Armored Force Board. These prototypes were officially designated as the Carriage Motor 105mm Howitzer T-32. Due to the urgency, the first prototype was essentially a modified M3 medium tank and failed to meet several design goals. The elevation and traverse was limited, loading ammunition was hard, and it could only carry 18 rounds, far fewer than the requested 40. Armor protection was proof against 50 caliber armor-piercing rounds at a range of 320 meters. The side armor extended only to the neckline of an average soldier. Based on these evaluations, it was recommended that the superstructure armor on the next prototype be reduced from 3/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, or about 12.7 millimeters, and that the side and rear armor be lowered by 11 inches to save weight and improve functionality. After initial testing at Aberdeen, the first T-32 pilot vehicle was sent to the Armored Force at Fort Knox for further evaluation. The feedback was for a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on either a ball-bearing race or a folding pedestal on the rear deck, an access door to facilitate transmission servicing, and the ammunition capacity increased to 57 rounds. These modifications were officially approved during an Armored Force Board conference on February 8, 1942. Incorporating lessons learned from earlier testing, the second T-32 pilot was revised with several significant design changes. Most visibly was the front armor, which was altered to create more interior space. A step was added to the side armor, and a ring mount was installed for the 50 caliber machine gun. The second pilot was rebuilt at Aberdeen Proving Ground and designated as the production prototype. Following successful evaluation, the American locomotive company ALCO received the first production contract for 600 vehicles. The first production model was completed in March 1942 and arrived at Aberdeen on April 6th. It was at this point the vehicle was officially standardized as the Carriage Motor 105mm Howitzer M7, a self-propelled gun that would later be known to history under another nickname. The British, who were among the primary recipients of the M7 under Lend-Lease, continued their tradition of naming self-propelled guns after members of the Christian clergy. Examples include the Carrier 6-pounder gun AEC Mark I Deacon, the Ordnance QF 25-pounder on Carrier Valentine 25-pounder Mark I Bishop, and the M7's eventual successor, the 25-pounder SP Tracked Sexton. The M7 itself was dubbed the Priest, as British crews thought the machine gun mount resembled a pulpit, lending it a clerical association. Production at the ALCO began shortly after the M7 was standardized. The first two vehicles arrived at Aberdeen on April 6, 1942, one for automotive testing and the other for a stowage study. Around the same time, reports from the British 8th Army in North Africa provided valuable frontline feedback. These included improved armor protection, M4-style bogies, and increased ammunition capacity. After 90 to 100 vehicles, the M3-style engine deck was phased out in favor of the M4 Sherman style. Mid-1942, Aberdeen Proving Ground conducted quality tests to identify manufacturing standards and uncover any design weaknesses. Several production issues were highlighted. The ammunition required better protection. The 50 caliber 12.7mm machine gun needed more clearance, and the existing Howitzer travel lock was awkward and needed redesigned. By December 1942, the M3 style suspension bogies were transitioning to the M4 Sherman's type. These new components were introduced gradually as older stock was depleted and newer parts became available. In 1943, the original 3-piece transmission was replaced with a more durable cast transmission. In May, the Desert Warfare Board issued a series of improvement recommendations based on combat experience. These included a redesigned howitzer travel lock, a gun tube lock, hinged ammunition stowage plates, and an upgraded machine gun ring mount. Production at the Alco ceased in August 1943 after 2,814 vehicles had been manufactured. However, ongoing Lend-Lease commitments, particularly to the British, created further demand. As a result, Alco received a new contract in March 1944 to produce an additional 500, which were completed between March and October 1944. In September 1943, it was decided that 70% of new M7s should use the M4A3 Sherman chassis, designated as the M7B1. Production of the B1 began in 1944 at the Pressed Steel Car Company, with 826 units completed in 2 batches by February 1945. The final production series of M7s was assigned to the Federal Machine and Welder Company, as Alco was no longer available. These were equipped with E9 suspension and began deliveries in March 1945, but the contract was canceled with only 176 completed. The M7 measured 6 meters in length, 2.88 meters wide, and 2.54 meters high. Its armor thickness varied depending on location. The upper hull front, upper sides, rear upper, and bottom rear were protected by 12.7mm or half an inch of armor. The lower sides and lower rear were more heavily armored at 1.5 inches or 38mm, while the bottom front received 25.4 or a full inch of protection. Armor over the transmission ranged from 5mm to 11.43mm. The original M7 was powered by the Continental R975C4, a 9-cylinder radial gasoline engine producing 400 net horsepower at 2400 RPM. It was fed by fuel tanks mounted on either side of the engine, holding a total of 175 US gallons, or about 660 liters. This setup provided a top speed of 42 km per hour, or 26 miles an hour. The M7B1 variant used the Ford GAA, an 8-cylinder gasoline engine providing 450 net horsepower at 2600 RPM. With a slightly smaller fuel capacity of 168 gallons, it offered a range of up to 130 miles, or about 200 kilometers, and maintained a similar top speed. The N7 suspension system used the vertical volute spring suspension, which consisted of a 13-tooth front drive sprocket, 3 bogie assemblies per side, and an idler wheel. This system enabled the M7 to overcome a 60% gradient, cross a trench 1.88 meters or 74 inches wide, and climb a vertical obstacle up to 61 centimeters or 24 inches. The tank's minimum turning diameter was 18.9 meters or 62 feet. To improve mobility on soft ground, duckbill end connectors, C-shaped protrusions attached to the edge of the tracks, were introduced to increase the track's surface area and reduce ground pressure. The E9 suspension program further addressed this by mounting the bogies on extensions connected to the hull, allowing duckbill connectors on both sides of each track. This increased the effective track width from 42.1 centimeters or 16.6 inches to 60.17 centimeters or 23.7 inches, significantly enhancing off-road performance. The main armament of the M7 was the 105mm M2A1 howitzer, which used semi-fixed ammunition, and had an elevation range of -5 to +35 degrees, with a traverse of 15 degrees left and 30 degrees to the right. Mounted atop the vehicle in the distinctive pulpit was a 12.7mm M2 Browning machine gun with 360-degree traverse and only 300 rounds of ammunition. The crew complement initially consisted of 7 members, later expanded to 8. This was the driver, chief of section, gunner, assistant gunner, and 3 to 4 cannoneers, depending on operational requirements. After September 1943, the standard organization of each Armored Field Artillery Battalion, or AFAB, included 3 Howitzer Motor Carriage batteries along with headquarters and service elements. Each battery typically had 6 M7s, though T-19s were used as substitutes earlier in the war. Before this reorganization, each M7 was accompanied by an M3 half-track for an ammunition mule. After September, this shifted to a designated ammunition section within each battery. While AFABs typically operated as unified battalions, they could be broken down into individual batteries to support smaller combat elements. For instance, a battery might support 1 tank company and 2 armored infantry companies. During deployment, guns would be aligned parallel in the gun line, with spacing adjusted based on terrain and tactical needs. Vehicles were positioned to prevent damage from muzzle blasts while remaining close enough to maintain communication, often through field telephones laid in advance. Notably, the M7 HMC itself lacked an onboard radio, relying on external coordination for receiving fire missions. Fire orders originated from the Battalion Fire Direction Center, transmitted by radio to battery command half-tracks. These, in turn, relayed instructions to the fire control section, which then passed firing data to each M7 through field telephones or voice communication via the battery executive officer. Initially proposed as an act to promote the defense of the United States, the Lend-Lease Act in 1941 allowed the U.S. to supply material support to Allied nations fighting in World War II before officially entering the conflict. This significantly impacted the availability of the M7 Howitzer Motor Carriage. During a strategy meeting on June 21, 1942 at the White House, President Franklin D. Roosevelt committed to supplying the British with newly developed M4 Shermans, a commitment that also included the M7s. As a result, U.S. forces faced a shortage of M7s, which led to the deployment of less capable T-19 HMCs during Operation Torch, thereby prompting an increase in M7 production. M7s arrived in Tunisia in January 1943, supported by the U.S. Second Corps. On March 19, 1943, the 58th Armored Field Artillery Battalion, part of the 5th Armored Field Artillery Group, supported the 1st Armored Division in its attack on Sened Station, continuing operations through the end of the North African campaign. During the invasion of Sicily in July 1943, the M7 was widely used by the U.S. 7th Army. The M7 also took part in the invasion of Italy beginning September 3, 1943, and played a role in the Anzio landings in early 1944. During the Normandy landings in June 1944, the M7 served primarily in armored field artillery battalions with armored divisions, often used as expedient assault guns. As they approached the beaches, these units fired from landing craft, providing early fire support. In the Pacific theater, the M7 saw limited initial service. In 1943, it was used in the Philippines campaign as part of infantry cannon companies. By 1944, the U.S. Marine Corps had worn out their M3 75mm gun motor carriages and began replacing them with M7s, which were referred to in Marine service as SPMs, or self-propelled mounts. M7 saw their most significant Pacific action during the Okinawa campaign in 1945, and continued to serve in the Philippines through 1945. Following the end of World War II, many M7s and M7B1s were either scrapped or sold off as part of the general drawdown. However, both types returned to service during the Korean War. Combat in Korea revealed that the M7's original 35-degree elevation was inadequate for mountainous terrain. This led to the development of the M7B2, which featured a modified mount, allowing for 65 degrees of elevation. The M7B2 proved highly effective in Korea and remained in service into the 1950s, with some units held in reserve into the 60s. Due to the Lend-Lease Act and post-war military assistance programs, the M7 has seen service with many other countries. During the war, Britain received 832 M7s through Lend-Lease. These would see combat beginning in around September 1942 with the 8th Army for the rest of the North African campaign, the invasion of Sicily, and the Italian campaign. The 21st Army Group also used the M7 during the Normandy campaign. Early in the Normandy campaign, however, the M7s were replaced by the similar Sexton self-propelled gun. As a result, the M7 were stripped of their guns and up-armored in order to create kangaroos, and they served as such until the end of the war. Not all British M7s were converted because the 18th Field Regiment still used M7s in the Burma campaign from 1944 to 45. The Free French Army was another recipient of the tank, as their forces were organized and equipped by the United States in a similar way to their own units. As part of this, they were given the 283 M7s, which were used in combat in 1944 and 45. These first saw combat in the 2nd Armored Division in August 1944. The French M7 HMCs likely remained in service after World War II until they developed an indigenous replacement. In spring 1945, Yugoslav partisans received 19 M7s, which they erroneously called Shermans. Additional vehicles will be supplied to the country post-war through the United States Mutual Defense Aid Program. Besides Yugoslavia, M7s were also equipped to Argentina, Belgium, Israel, Italy, Norway, Pakistan, and West Germany. The Philippines inherited any M7s that the United States left behind after World War II. And this concludes our video on the M7. What do you think of this howitzer motor carriage? Which vehicle should we cover next? Let us know in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on our future content. If you'd like to go one step further, consider Patreon or PayPal. We want to especially thank our medium and heavy tank Patreon supporters: Dan Fitzpatrick, Dave Shuford, Leslie Holkower, Michael Herman, Nick H., Owen M., R. Rob, Sopwith21, and Wolfhund. Your generous contributions help fund our research, illustrations, and video production. Until next time, keep us in your sights.